Good morning, everybody, and welcome back to Coffee with Craig. I am Craig. Here's my coffee, and that is my backup coffee. So for those of you who dare say that, well, I have more than a cup, technically I have 2 cups, just they both happen to be very big cups of coffee. Anyway, thank you guys for tuning in and for being a part of the conversation as we talk about firearms policy, you name it, guns, gun culture, all across these fruited plains. Wanted to remind you guys to like and share this video feed so that your friends can become our friends and join us in the conversation. Also, subscribe to our YouTube channel and follow us on Facebook so that you can get the alerts when we go live so that you can participate in the conversation. You guys, if you look in there, there's live comments going on, and I know you guys want to chime in. You guys seem to have a lot of fun doing that. Now, as we go forward, wanted to remind you once again, FPC Gear is open. FPCgear.com. That's FPCgear.com. You can get all sorts of cool t-shirts. We've actually added a couple of new ones, and we're designing some new ones every week. So you guys, even if you bought something, you want to go back and check it out because you're probably going to see something that you're going to want to get. And know that every dollar that you spend goes right back into the fight for your civil rights. Now, speaking of the fight for your civil rights, we have a giveaway going. It's for a Ghost Gun 2 CNC machine. That's right, we're giving the finger to Mr. Ghost Gun De Leon and his little brother, Ghost Gun Mike Gibson, who's trying to put together another Ghost Gun bill because, well, if you can't ban ghost guns more than once, what's the point, right? Anyway, so in order to kind of encourage them, or just, get them upset. We're actually giving away the CNC machine. Now, we're going to be doing 4 of them. So you're going to have an opportunity to enter. So that means that every time you enter, you got a chance to win 1 of 4. Now, we're asking you to donate in order to help us fight that effort. As I always say, you do not have to donate to enter, but you do have to enter to win. How do you do so? You just follow the link in the description to this video, and it'll tell you how you can donate. Wink, wink. Please donate. And how you can be entered to win. And those are my PSAs for the day. Also, got to make sure I always give a shout out. This show is brought to you by Sacramento Black Rifle and Sparks Black Rifle, 2 of the premier gun shops here on the West Coast who don't just believe in the commerce of firearms, but also believes in the right to keep and bear arms and supporting your right to be able to do so. So support them as they support you. Now, let's get into today's show. I always like to say that I'm not a lawyer, and I didn't sleep in a Holiday Inn Express last night. And I get asked a lot of questions, a lot of legal questions and stuff like that. And the funny part is that, I always tell people I'm not a lawyer and I'm not your lawyer, most importantly. But, I had a chance to see a guy being interviewed on Fox News. And this was a guy, what I really liked about him is that he didn't just understand the legal aspect of firearms, but he understands the technical aspect of firearms. This is a person who's a combat veteran. This is a person who talks a lot about shooting, about long range shooting, but also, once again, has an understanding of the law and how that law applies. So I wanted to bring him on board to share some of his knowledge and wisdom with you. And with that, I'd like to introduce Mr. Ryan Cleckner. Ryan, how are you doing today?
I'm doing great, Greg. Thanks for having me on. I've got my coffee here too, and I'm ready to go.
All right. So do me a favor, for our audience who may not be familiar with you, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Well, born and raised shooting and hunting in Phoenix, Arizona. So I love elk hunting. I love getting in the outdoors. I went into the military. I was a sniper and sniper team leader in 1st Ranger Battalion. Went to Afghanistan a couple times and decided it was time to go back to college and get out while still having fun. And went back to school and ended up becoming an attorney and started working for the Firearms Industries Trade Association, the NSSF. They're the guys that run the SHOT Show and stuff like that. So I started doing federal government affairs for them. And then Remington, big Evil Green, stole me away. And for a few years there, I was the vice president of Remington Outdoor Company. So all the conglomerate companies underneath that. and I traveled nonstop to 20 locations all across the country, and finally said, you know what, this is too much. I have two young kids. So I went to hang out my own shingle as a firearms compliance and ATF, the import exports, all that boring stuff attorney, and decided to write a book just because why not? You want to say you wrote a book someday. That's kind of cool. So I wrote my book on my own and published it. I give 25% away to military charities, and I blinked and it's been the bestseller, the number one bestseller still on Amazon in its category 27 months later, and has made enough money that I just don't do lawyering much anymore. I just love to keep teaching long-range shooting, and I have a bunch of long-range shooting videos, and every other day it seems like I have a new entrepreneur project coming up, and I get to do cool stuff like this and talk with you, Craig.
Yeah. Well, you know what? I very much appreciate you taking the time. You know, one of the things that I really want to talk with you about, and we'll start with this one. You're familiar, and you've probably seen the commercial that's been put out by a number of veterans, and you know, they make the point that, well, the AR-15 is basically a military weapon and has no place in civilian society. And we know that's being expanded to include, but maybe not by them, but by others, to include a ban on all semi-automatic firearms. And you know, one being a former combat veteran, but also you know, being a firearms expert and an attorney. I wanted to get your perspective on that.
Well, I have a couple of views on that one, Craig, and one may not be too popular, but who cares? I'll say it anyway. Is actually nothing but military-grade firearms should be allowed, in my opinion. Deer hunting rifles aren't protected by the Second Amendment. The Second Amendment was not about deer hunting. The Second Amendment was about overthrowing a potentially tyrannical government. You know, one of the early Supreme Court cases on firearms laws, U.S. v. Miller. This is right after the National Firearms Act came out, so 1934. And a trucker was pulled over and arrested for having a short-barreled shotgun in his truck. And since he didn't register under the NFA, they were prosecuting him for it. And he argued back that the NFA was unconstitutional because that short-barreled shotgun was a firearm, and therefore he had the right to possess it, and the government had no right to tell him he couldn't have it. And the Supreme Court, the U.S. Supreme Court, actually went to the military and asked if they had any particular use for a short-barrel shotgun. And the military said, no, it's not very useful in combat. So the Supreme Court came back and said that the short-barreled shotgun is not protected by the Second Amendment because it doesn't have a useful application in the military. So the law has been overturned since then. People have changed their interpretation since then. But that's a big deal to me, to look at some clues of, so what, it's used in the military. That's the whole point of the Second Amendment. Now, the other side of the argument is, no, it's not the same firearm. An M4 in the military is a full auto or a select fire. It can shoot fully automatic rifle, where a civilian AR-15 is not. There's a big difference between those two. Yes, they have similar parts. Yes, they may fire a similar bullet. But the first part of my argument is, who cares? That's how it should be. The second part is, it's not really the same tool at all. That's not true. And I guess a third argument here is, who cares? It's just the tool. Just because it's similar equipment doesn't mean it's going to be used for similar purpose. You know, here's another unpopular example, is most women I know have the equipment to be a prostitute. It doesn't mean that because they have that tool that they're going to be one. It's up to the person to make choices in their life, and similar equipment does not mean similar circumstances.
Wow. Okay. So I love that one. I'm probably gonna use that one. I will completely and utterly credit you.
Appreciate it. Yeah.
But that's right. That is right on. It is a tool, and when you spend so much time focusing on the tool as opposed to what the root causes are. Now, one of the other things that you do is you do consultation on safety, right? You're a safety expert, and
I'm accidentally becoming one, for sure. Yes.
So now tell me a little bit about, what are you noticing when you start hearing these conversations about about banning firearms. What is your general response when you start talking about how you promote a safe environment, whether at school or at a business or anything like that?
Well, as a maxim, criminals don't obey laws. And matter of fact,
Shocking.
criminals will never obey laws, because if they started obeying laws, they wouldn't be a criminal. So by definition, a criminal has to have not obeyed a law for them to become a criminal. So we're never going to legislate people's behavior. That doesn't work. I mean, let's say you could pass a law, and this would be a horrible idea, so please don't take this sound by anybody. And let's say we passed a law that said all guns are forever forbidden in America. I would expect that to be just as successful as prohibition was on alcohol, or as it is on meth now. We have a zero tolerance policy on crystal meth in this country. It's everywhere. Matter of fact, not only is it everywhere, it's in the people's hands that don't respect the law. So you ban guns, you're almost guaranteed that the only people that are going to have guns are the people that have meth. That sounds like a horrible idea. The other problem is guns not being on a school campus have done nothing to help safety. In fact, we hear stories from generations before us where they used to have hunting rifles in their trucks. So the number of guns on campuses have actually gone down, yet the violence has gone up. So it's not a gun problem. I often tell people, too, when new businesses start up, I have a new business here in town, has the big no guns allowed sign. And I mentioned to them, I said, you know what? There's two categories of businesses out there. There's a category that is a high likelihood as a potential for a mass shooting, and those that aren't. And if you want to jump into the category of being a high likelihood as a target for a mass shooting, the way you get into that category is by banning guns. Because all of our mass shootings happen in places where guns are banned. So just by statistics, you would think if you don't want to be a target of a mass shooting, you better start allowing firearms.
Well, because I mean, if you look at situations where shooters encounter an armed individual, whether it's law enforcement or whether it's an armed citizen, it almost immediately ends the shooting rampage, because either they run, they'll go and they'll commit suicide, or the person that confronts them is able to shoot them and disarm them.
I'll take that one step further, Craig. It not only does an armed person end up stopping it, an armed person keeps it from starting. It's not an accident that all of these mass shootings happen in gun-free zones. That's just not coincidence of, man, would you look at that? It just happened to be a gun-free zone. No. The Aurora, Colorado movie theaters, shopping malls, schools, certain restaurants, these places, 9/11, these types of attacks happen specifically in places that are gun-free. So I think that we miss the benefit of the protection that we get from having firearms by talking only about how they solve the problem. I think they prevent it. Or else, if more guns per square foot meant more problems, gun shows would be the only places that would be having these problems. And yet those are the only places that you're never going to have a mass shooting.
Well, like every time I start looking at for example, people say, well, they look at Chicago and they say, well, look, Chicago, Chicago, you have guns that are being brought in from other states like Indiana. And so that's what's happening. And the question I always ask them is this. So if simple access to firearms is all it takes to trigger violence, then why aren't the people in Indiana shooting each other?
Yeah.
Why aren't they committing a whole bunch of violence? Why is it the people from Chicago who are doing it?
That's a great point. I never thought about it that way. That's really good, Craig, is they say, well, they're all coming from that evil Indiana place. And you want to say, you mean that place with all the gun crime? Oh, no, they don't. Yeah, that's a really good point. The other problem or thing I bring up is, what do you want to stop, everybody? Do you want to stop gun violence, or do you just want to stop violence? Because here's another unpopular thing I'm going to say. If you banned all guns, yes, they'd still exist. Yes, there'd still be crime, and only the bad people would have them. But I bet that gun violence would go down. Again, I know that's unpopular. I bet it would happen. But I know that violence overall would go up because you have a bunch of unarmed victims. Look at Australia. They're so happy about their gun bans. Gun violence did go down. Of course it went down. You banned guns. But overall violence, rapes, murders, battery, assault, all have increased since then because people can't defend themselves. So
they saw a dramatic increase. Right after their ban, they saw a dramatic increase in rape, in home invasion robberies, in assault, in battery. It was huge. Yeah. I went on a show. I went on a show there in Australia, And it was the funniest thing because they didn't think that, oh, I don't know, I would actually research crime statistics in Australia. And they are in complete and utter, at least the media and a lot of the politicians are in complete and utter denial about the violence problem that they have there in Australia.
So I like that question because it helps me know what someone's argument is right away. If they start trying to argue gun control with me, I just stop right away and say, are you interested in reducing gun violence or all violence? And some people are honest enough to say gun violence. I'll respond with, okay, great, carry on. And I'll stop the conversation because I'm not going to change their mind.
Exactly. So moving forward a little bit, some of these laws that are being proposed either at the national level or in various different states, wanted to kind of get your perspective on the efficacy of some of them. And one, for example, is banning 18 to 20-year-olds from being able to purchase long guns.
You're either an adult or you're not. So if we are going to do that, which I don't agree with, if you are going to do that, and we're going to say that you don't have the proper decision-making ability until you're 21, then let's do it across the board. And you can't enter into a contract, and you're still going to live at home. You can't make decisions for yourself, and you can't do anything until you're 21. We just need to pick a number. And I think the number 21, I could argue against it, but it's as arbitrary as 18. So pick a number, be an adult, stick to it.
Well, Representative Massey has actually introduced a bill that would actually reduce the age to 18 to be able to purchase a handgun. Because
I think it should be.
I happen to believe that, and I agree with people who argue, well, why is there that inconsistency? I agree. You should be able to purchase a handgun if you are 18 years old.
Correct. Again, you're an adult or you're not.
Yeah,
pick one.
Yeah. If we can send you halfway across the world, halfway around the globe, and put a firearm in your hand until you defend our country, then you ought to be able to defend your home.
Well, here's the problem too: is when I was at the NSSF, we used to talk about this perfect law that we were waiting to have happen, and now it looks like we have it with Dick's and Walmart, changing the age. Is what's going to happen when we have a service member that's deployed, and let's say his wife is at home with a child, and she's 19 or 20, and she can't get a handgun to protect herself. That we thought was going to be like the perfect lawsuit. Is not only is he old enough to be off protecting the world, but she's old enough to be at home raising a family, and we're not going to allow her to defend herself? Yeah. So the other problem is these mass shootings that we have, I don't know the stat off the top of my head. I'm just going to make up a number and say 98% wouldn't have changed anything if we changed the age to 21. Newtown wouldn't have changed. He stole the guns from his mother. Florida, I don't think would have changed because he got the guns back anyway he shouldn't have had, or the shooters are older. So I hear this call to do something. We've just got to do something. Well, you know what? Ban cell phones. Ban an ability to communicate. Because not just to say I'm going to attack another amendment on our civil rights, but that is probably used more in terrorist attacks than a firearm is anyway. We can't just do something at the risk of hurting ourselves as a nation. We started a project on our own. I don't know if you know Kyle Lamb of Viking Tactics. Kyle Lamb and I and another business partner have come together, and we've built something that has nothing to do with infringing on people's rights. We call it Mayday Safety. We just launched it a couple weeks ago. It is part smartphone app, part desktop computer system that allows anyone to send out an emergency alert. So it's like Waze is kind of the crowdsourced mapping navigation software. This is kind of like Waze, but for safety. It allows everyone to crowdsource in alerts and issues, and it allows communication to go back out. And we made the decision about a week before it launched that we were going to make the app free for everyone in the world. We were going to try and make money off of that. We said, you know what? No, we can do it. Give it away to everybody. The dashboard we're selling to businesses, and organizations to be able to manage their organization. But for people, for themselves and for their families, we have people downloading it now because they're realizing that they can keep their head on a swivel and see an attack that's going on nearby in a foreign country if you wanted to. And if people are interested in checking it out, please help spread the word, because I personally, Craig, get tired of always having to defend why the gun laws won't work, because I think we're both logical guys. It invites the question, well, what will work? I don't want to be the guy that just sits there and says, no, that won't do it. No, that won't do it. No, that won't do it. I want someone to come back with something that will do it. So that's why we did this.
Well, that sounds phenomenal. So where can folks, where can they download this app?
Well, they can check out maydaysafety.com and they can learn about it from there. And it's only available for iTunes in the App Store right now for Apple. And it's just Mayday Safety, and it's coming on Android in a couple weeks.
All right, folks. So you'll be able to find it in the description to this video. You'll find a link to that as well.
Oh, I appreciate that. I'm just thinking, you go avoiding a gunfight sometimes is the best way to go, right?
Well, but isn't that what we're taught? The best way to win a gunfight is to not get in it?
Exactly right. So now you're at the shopping mall, your phone goes off like one of the Amber Alerts, and you look down and you see that the next building over, there's a disturbance. It's time to not be a hero. It's time to grab your family and get them to safety.
Exactly. And I really think that people outside, people who aren't interested or scared of firearms, I really think they don't understand the level of teaching that goes on when that is largely about avoiding that sort of conflict. You don't want to be in that situation if you don't have to be in that situation. They just have this mentality of the wild, wild west, and every dispute is going to be settled with a gun. And those are not the people who are legally owning firearms. When you start talking about minors who are committing gun crimes, right, they're almost always firearms that were obtained illegally. Not almost always. Always is times where they were obtained illegally, and they're usually related to gangs or drugs. You could take all the gun crime. If you want to talk about, do we really have a gun violence issue in this country? Let's just be real. You could probably take about 5% of this country geographically. Less than 5% of this country geographically. And then look to the people in those communities that are either in gangs or deal in drugs. And you will get probably 90 to 95% of all gun violence in this country.
Without a doubt.
Without a doubt.
And they're already breaking other laws. I mean, so that's the problem is when you have some sick person, because it's the person, that's willing to murder children. Murder is the highest penalty crime we have in this country. And if the deterrent for that crime is not enough to stop them, a lesser crime isn't going to stop them either. It's crazy. Yeah.
You're making entirely too much sense. So now earlier you talked about your book. Tell me a little bit about the book, and then let our folks know how they can get a copy.
I appreciate that. It's called The Long Range Shooting Handbook. It's about as simple as I could make it. I do some videos for the NSSF on shooting, and we had some videos that we thought might be boring, like 15-minute videos of just me standing there talking about what a minute of angle is or how to mount your scope. And those things took off to millions of views. And we went, oh, well, people like those because I'm trying to break it down simply. I am the long-range shooting guy that is maybe the Bob Ross. There's a throwback for people if they know who Bob Ross is. I'm trying to tell people you can do this. I'm not one of the guys that says, oh, I'm so cool and this is so difficult, you can't join our club. So I realized that people liked the breaking it down simply. So I'll put that into a book. And I just start at the basics. I talk about what the parts are, what things are, how they work, how to use them. And I go through it. And some of the biggest feedback I get from the book, I think it has 720 reviews on Amazon right now with 5-star rating. It's been great. I've been very fortunate that people have liked the book. But a lot of the reviews I get are, take the word beginner off because this is great for advanced folks. So it works in both areas, but it really is meant to be a beginner book, and 25% to charities. So check it out on Amazon. And I think we should give some of your listeners some. So I'll get you some, Craig, for a giveaway you guys are doing so they have a chance to win an autographed copy of the book from me if they'd like one.
Wow. Thank you. I really appreciate that. And I'm sure that our viewers very much appreciate that. Thank you for coming on, and we appreciate you. We appreciate all that you do, being a positive voice for the Second Amendment. There are a lot of people who advocate and believe in the Second Amendment, but we don't necessarily always have people who effectively communicate our positions. I
appreciate that, Greg.
Either
Thanks.
Technically or legally, or in some cases just putting it in clear, plain English. And every opportunity that I've had a chance to see it, you do that, and you did it right here on the show. So thank you.
Thanks, man.
Thank you so much. All right, everybody, that's going to be it for today's Coffee with Craig. Very much appreciate you guys tuning in. Please remember to like and share these videos. Let all of your friends know about the Firearms Policy Coalition. We are the home in the fight for civil rights. Got to use them, or you're going to lose them. You guys take care.
If you like our videos, follow, subscribe, like, and share.